So we're sitting now in the Midland Road Derby studios of WWII Limited, and the present Managing Director, Hubert King, is with me, and we're going to talk about his history in the firm and the history of the firm as well. So Hubert, you started here at quite an early age, I believe.
Yes, 14 actually, and I basically wanted to be an engineer in the first place, and my father said if you put him into engineering it'll kill him, because I suffered very badly with asthma in the very early days.
At that time, did you?
At that time.
Right.
And strangely enough, it made me. The place was so, how can one put it, cold, because there was no central heating in those days. And it was virtually like one of the cures for asthma and that sort of thing was send them to Switzerland.
Yes, in the open air.
In the open air and so on. But it worked for me, and I found it very good. I had the occasional attack, but soon got over them. And
so your health improved?
Health improved,
and you put that down to being in the cold environment of winters at that time. So was your father involved in the business?
No, father was not involved in the business, but my uncle was, and I've more or less followed in my uncle's footsteps, as you might say.
Yeah. But your grandfather, he was involved in the business for a
oh
long
yes,
time.
Oh yes, from the day when he took it over from Mr. Winter. And they formed a partnership of a gentleman called Shepherd, Mr. Shepherd, and formed Shepherd and King, which was still trading on the name of WWII. And then Mr. Shepherd went back into engineering, and my grandfather took the business over from him completely. So it's been more or less in the King family since that time.
Yes. And your uncle, what sort of character was he then?
He was a very good portrait photographer, and also a first-class artist. He had terrific talents in portrait, actually painting. So he started from a very, very good base, very good indeed.
And when you were here when you were 14, did you have a lot of training? Was it training on the job? How did that work?
It was more or less training on the job for say, the first five years. And then I had the good fortune to go to the Nottingham College of Arts and Crafts, and got on the photographic course there, which was 1 day and 3 nights a week, which was quite a thing to, how can one put it, keep going. And we hadn't got any cars in those days. We used to go over on the bus, which was, by the time you had a week of that, you certainly done a day's work as well. You certainly a little tired, put it that way.
Yes, it was quite an effort to do all that. It must have been.
Yes, indeed, very much.
Especially
so.
In the winter, no doubt.
Oh, very true. Winter didn't improve things.
So how long would it take you to get over there? An hour each way, or
something in that order? Yes, something in that order. Yeah.
So that went on for quite a few years.
Yes, about I think it was three years.
But you were still working in the studios.
In the studio
as well.
Yes, but I had a terrific experience studio-wise before I went over there, which helped me.
You must have been at an advantage compared with some of the other students then.
Yes, very true. And I was very fortunate to have a tutor like Harry Beaumont, absolutely first-class man. And I learned a considerable amount on photography and practical sides of photography.
But it was an experience you were glad to have had then?
Oh yeah, yes. And of course, Beaumont was both a very good lecturer, and he had quite an amount of industrial photography experience before he went into lecturing. And myself, in the number of years before I went over to Nottingham, I could talk to him on a, shall we say, an experience level, because I had the practical experience.
Yes.
And so on. And of course, he with that we found a lot of common ground.
Yes, it must have been an experience for both of you
Well,
at that
indeed,
time.
in a way, yes. He's a wonderful man, wonderful man.
So when you started here, the premises were a lot bigger, weren't they, than they are now?
Yes, they're about twice the size of what it is now.
And how many people would be employed, roughly?
We had at that particular time, I think it was 6 people. The memory fades, to be quite honest with you, Ray. But prior to that, the staffing was somewhere in the order of about 12 to 14 people. We had printers and retouchers, and also we had a frame making side of the business, and gilders. So we had quite a comprehensive group of people working for us.
So at that time, the firm must have been at the cutting edge of photography, really, if it could do all
yes,
that.
yes, in the early days, there certainly was. The format of the negatives in those days was probably 12 by 10 or 15 by 12 inches, and the more general sort of portrait work would be done on 8 by 6.
All glass plates?
All glass plates. And it moved from that to quarter plates as the years progressed.
Yeah, so you had a good grounding in large-scale photography, which
Indeed, yes.
most people won't have been aware of, especially now.
Yeah, I was very, very fortunate indeed, very fortunate.
Were you involved in the actual processing, or just in the taking of photographs?
No, I did the whole lot, as you might say.
Including retouching? Or?
Retouching, yes, and processing of glass plates and printing of things. And in the very early days, we used to print the proofs on printing out paper, which was virtually all done in daylight.
Yes, we've seen some pictures here of printing out being done in frames around a sort of gallery.
That's right, yes, on the roof. And it was quite something, and it was all right during the summer. It was very nice, but in the winter it was a little bit chilly. And of course, one always got rather busy towards Christmas. And again, it could be 2 top coats, not just one working on the roof.
So in the open air was that then?
Oh yes, in the open air, yes.
Even in the winter?
Even in the winter, yes.
And were the premises heated in your time, or had that stopped?
No, there was no heating as such, but it did get rather chilly. I mean, there was heating in the studio area and the shop, but on the roof, and obviously there was no heating up there.
You showed me old pictures, and there are still traces of an old central heating system here. So that was from the early days, was it, that system?
Yes, indeed, yes, that was in the early days. And of course we used to generate our own electrical power. And if you go right to the beginnings, people will remember that there was no electric light, street lighting, it was all gas lighting. And it wasn't till a little later on that they had an electrical power, and of course Winter was the first man to look at this and think that's the way we've got to go. So they had electrical power generators in the back of the premises.
They were actually at the rear of the premises then, were they?
Premises,
in the open air, presumably, were they?
No, it was in the specially built, how can I put it?
Sort of engine room.
Or engine room, yes, you got it right, thank you. Yeah. Which,
so would they be petrol driven, or?
I understand they were diesel. I didn't actually, it had gone by the time I arrived in the company. Of course we were having power direct from the
mains.
From the mains. We had 2 sorts of power here. One was 230 230 volts, and then we had a 100-volt line as well, which is rather unique.
That was from the municipal supply,
Yes,
separate 100-volt line. Was that
Yeah.
DC then or AC?
It was DC, I think, on the 100-volt and alternating on the.
So what would the 100-volt line be used for? Do you remember?
It was for the. I think the carbon arc systems. It's before my time, Ray, so I couldn't really say exactly, but from what I understand.
Yeah, so the firm went in away from daylight through carbon arcs to electric light, did it, do you think?
That's right, yes, yeah. And of course, obviously, it was carbon arcs were electrically powered.
Yeah.
And we used to mix the both daylight and
The carbon light.
carbon arc systems together. The thing was that the material was so very slow. There's no speed in it at all.
You need a long exposure, would you?
Long exposures.
What sort of order are we talking about?
Um,
For, say, a portrait setting, how long would people have to sit still for?
well, it depended on the day. I mean, if the sun was out, pouring through the windows, well, it didn't actually, because
Yeah.
it was a North Light studio. If it was a bright day, they were probably talking about 5 or 10 seconds. If it was a duller day, it'd be even longer than that.
That'd be a long time for anybody to pose.
Oh, Lord, yes, absolutely.
Which is why I suppose you see a lot of people holding on to something while they're having their portrait taken.
Yes, very much so.
And you don't see them smiling.
No,
on the whole,
no.
'cause-
They had a device which was a cast iron stand, and it just stood at the back of the person having the portrait taken, and there was a device, a bit like a U-face device, which fitted in the back of their heads, and it just held them
just to give them,
steady.
make a nice rigid
give
pose.
that. And I wouldn't particularly use that with the weather was very, very bad. So what used to happen, we'd say, just sit there for a moment or two. I'll go and have my dinner, and then I'll come back and you can call it done. Very long exposures.
Were there mechanical shutters or just take a cap off the lens?
Cap off the lens in the very early days.
And count, presumably?
Yeah, and count.
And with experience, you know how long to take the cap off?
Oh, very, very true. Yes. They were mechanical shutters, but nothing like the compass shutters and focal plane shutters like we have today.
Have a sort of
Flap,
pneumatic operated flap sometimes,
yeah, that's
was
right.
it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it was shortly after the war that you joined Winters formally, was it?
Yes, that's right, Ray. Yes.
Well, before or after the really bad winter? It was 47, wasn't
I
it?
think the memory is a bit vague on that one, but yes, I do see it memories it's on the coal side. Yeah.
And what was the mainstay of work at that time in the firm? Portraiture or what exactly?
It was portraiture mainly. The odd, shall we say, wedding group and that. And then, of course, later the industrial side of the business expanded quite considerably.
You say there were weddings. Did you go out on location for weddings at that time, or wasn't it
oh
feasible?
yes. We went out on location because where would take probably 200 or 300 odd shots minimal these sort of days. We went out with 8 double dark slides, which was 8 shots. So you couldn't afford to make any mistakes. And again, the size of plates they would use in the very early days would be a minimum of 8 by 6 inches.
In your time?
In my time.
So
yes.
do you remember going out on location for weddings then?
Oh yes,
doing that?
yes.
Yeah. So you just bring them back here to process? would you?
Process, that's right.
So the camera must have been quite large.
Oh, it was indeed, yeah. Oh yes, you'd an 8 by 6 field camera plus all the slides is quite a weighty bit of kit.
Must have been quite a responsibility to get the 8 shots reflecting the wedding correctly then.
Yes, it was a standard, as you might say. In other words, the bride would be photographed on her own, with the group of 2, and then possibly the mother and father of both the bride and groom and the bridesmaid, then a larger group, and probably another couple of groups around that. But it was basically group photography in those very early days.
And you couldn't take many shots in the end?
No,
it just wasn't
no.
practical?
No. You could, well, you just couldn't. Well, you could do, but you need a ton of double dark slides to do it, and it just wasn't practical.
So the kit you would take out for a wedding would be quite heavy?
Oh yes, extremely so. And of course, there was no cars in those days.
So how did you get to the wedding then?
Well, when on the bus.
Really?
Or not, yes. We're not very popular with the bus conductors, because by the time we got our bits of kit in the tripod and all the other bits and pieces, it just about filled their, shall we say, luggage compartment.
So how many people would go out on the one bus? 2 or 3 of you, or just 2 of you?
No, it's 2 of us, yes. Yes.
2 and a load of equipment?
That's right, yes, yeah.
So you were limited as to where you go, whether or not there was a bus route?
Yes, exactly, yes. And where you would go out with a car, with all the equipment, it was in the later on, I should say, it was relatively easy, but you had to fit to a bus timetable and the church timetable, and so you could take a complete day to
Just
do
for
a
one
wedding, yes, yeah.
So did you use flash at all? Any flash powder or anything like that for weddings, or was that not necessary?
No, we used the large expendable bulbs, and flash powder. I have used flash powder.
That was on the way out when you joined,
was
was
it? On the way out, yes. Very dangerous stuff.
Interesting but dangerous.
Oh, absolutely, yes, absolutely. And of course, the problem with using flash powder was when you fire it off, the flash heat distributes all the magnesium powder all over the place.
You get
And
white
it generally
powder
goes
everywhere.
up. Yes, it generally glows straight up in the air. And of course, you only used it on photographing the cake. So the great thing was to do it, pack up, and get it out of there very, very quickly before it settled on the cakes and the trifles. So it was quite a tat, I'll say the least.
Yes, you've got to time it right.
Absolutely.
So gradually things got more convenient,
Oh
with
yes,
more portability.
very much so.
So you were doing portraiture and weddings. Was there anything else that was done here, retouching of other people's work, or just only in-house stuff?
All the in-house stuff was retouched.
And gradually things got better in the sense you could do more things. So when did the industrial side sort of begin to take off, do you think? What was the main reason
It was
for
just
that?
after the war. It started to expand.
I suppose the war must have introduced a good few photographic innovations because of the need for reconnaissance and so on.
Yeah, exactly.
If I remember rightly, Charlie Barson, who was here for a long while, was involved in airborne reconnaissance, wasn't he?
That's
and
right.
photography.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
With rather large cameras again, I'm sure.
Yes, I think it was the film was 5 inches wide.
And it was film, not plates, wasn't it?
Oh yes.
Roll film.
Yeah, roll film was 5 inches wide, and I forget what the footage. I think it was in probably 50 or 100 feet. Special cameras.
Yes, with 50 or 100 feet of film exposed on a trip, and then brought back for analysis.
For processing, and then they'd print them off and form maps.
So Charlie Barson must have spent a lot of time in the air then in his army career.
No, he never actually flew.
Didn't he?
Because the cameras were mounted into the bombers. And
so they were automatic then, were they, in a way?
Yes, automatic, yes.
So Charlie was processing them afterwards,
processing them, taking them out of the aircraft and all the rest of it, yeah.
So what about as industry developed and photography came in for product promotion and so on, that gradually became one of Winter's main things, did it?
Yes, it was about, I think, at least 50% of our business at that particular time, yes.
Was the firm approached by other companies or through intermediaries such as advertising agencies?
advertising agencies and also companies, all sorts of both engineering, art orientated companies which wanted, shall we say, photographs of paintings for sales purposes, and all that goes sideways from all that sort of thing.
So do you remember whom you would term as one of the principal clients in that era? Is there anything stick in your mind particularly?
Not really, because it was so mixed. I mean, in my time, I photographed anything from heavy engineering to light precision engineering to paintings of all sorts and sizes.
So you go out on location for a lot of these jobs then, presumably, would you?
Oh yes, indeed. We would do work in the studio here, small engineering parts, again even down to diamonds and jewellery. I think in my time, you name it, I think I photographed it. So the variety that's half the beauty of the job was considerable.
Which did you think you enjoyed more? Was there a preference for portraiture as opposed to, say, industrial photography, or were they equally attractive to you?
Not really. I enjoyed both, to be quite honest with you. You met a lot of interesting people, whether you were going out on to jobs or people who come in to be photographer. You know, the managing directors photograph for publicity and all that sort of thing. So it was very, very rare. That was one of the great things about it. Very, very rare.
So some of the jobs you went out in the field, so to speak, must have been quite memorable in themselves. I seem to remember you said you've been to Willington Power Station, which is next, quite near Derby.
Yes, indeed, yes.
That was coal-fired, wasn't it?
That's coal-fired, yes.
So you saw that from ground up, did you?
We did indeed. We photographed the first sod being taken out, as you might say, to form the site base, right through to the finished day when they opened the station for power.
Who commissioned you to do that then?
I think it was Eubank and Partners, if my memory serves me right, and
they were the sort of engineering company designing the thing, were they?
That's right, yes. Yeah.
So it was a matter of doing shots for record purposes, really?
Yes, and also for the central generating board. One of the things one tends to forget, once they put the foundations in, anything that goes underneath there, unless you've got a photograph record of it, you don't know where the deuce it is. So that was the prime.
Of course, before the days of computerised planning and CAD and so on, you needed a photographic record.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
What other heavy engineering firms did you go to? Can you remember? What about foundries and so on? There were a few in Derby at that time, weren't there?
Yes, Lee's Malleable and
International Combustion, perhaps?
Yes, International Combustion. Yes.
Davis Derby?
Yes, Davis Derby, of course. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
What about lighting? If you were taking photographs of a big workshop, say a big railway workshop, did you have to do anything special for lighting, or was it all daylight?
It was daylight primarily, but because the actual to light those interiors it was difficult. But where you got an interior which was a very dark foundry sort of interior which reflects no light, we used to use probably 10 PF100 flashballs, really big stuff, and spread it on about 10 heads down the actual interior.
So how would you set them off?
It was electrical ray, yeah.
To a central point?
To a central point.
Would they all go off together? Or
they'd all go off together, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was quite a job to cable the things up.
And then you wouldn't presumably have many shots, so you've got to get it pretty well right first off.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's where the experience came in, presumably.
Yes, and also you could probably help yourself somewhat by processing the material when you came back, because we
Yeah.
processed it by inspection, so that really helped.
So you
I'm
could tweak it a
talking-
bit.
I'm talking black and white there.
Yeah.
But when it came down to colour work, it was a job of considerable experience, because you only really had, say, one chance at it.
Yeah. And the processing was out of your hands.
Exactly, yes, yeah.